Okay, welcome everyone. As I mentioned before, this is my first time to Dhammagiri Monastery, my first time to the Brisbane area. So far it's been a very pleasant time. You know, it is encouraging, it is inspiring to come and see such a well-developed monastery already within a relatively short amount of time. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nothing here, and then already, boom. You have a whole thriving, well-practiced monastery, teachings available, good Ajahn, good leader of the community, good Sangha for practicing. So, well done everybody. It's a real pleasure to see. It's an inspiration for us. And it is a responsibility, you know, for all of us who are interested in the Dhamma to make the effort to make it available for future generations. Buddhism at this time is still in is an interesting, unprecedented phase of expanding to many cultures throughout the world where it had never existed before. New Zealand, for example, or Brisbane. You know. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have, whether that's about the meditation, especially for those people who are here this morning, if you have questions arising from your meditation, any general questions about the Dhamma, generally answering questions on the Dhamma, but any question is fine.
I have a problem with the Anapanasati meditation. I get distracted by images coming into my mind. Sometimes they are sort of like designs or something, but mostly sort of like a crowd of people. They are not happy or sad, as if they are intently listening to something or watching something. Mm-hmm. And I open my eyes and start again. Sometimes it keeps recurring. Mm-hmm. What should I do?
When we begin to meditate and our samadhi begins to become established, we start to feel a bit more peaceful, then a whole range of phenomena can start to happen. Our perceptions start to get thrown out of balance a bit, and so we can start to get images arising, we can start to see bright lights, sometimes we get strange physical sensations. None of that is necessarily a problem, and none of it is necessarily a sign of progress. Right? So the answer is actually to ignore it. As long as we pay attention to it, it will tend to persist, which is a general rule of the Dhamma. Whatever we place our attention on will tend to become stronger. So if we pay attention to a particular bright light or an image that arises, if it's fascinating, it's either fascinating or sometimes a bit frightening. Sometimes people can be frightened, but either way, if we're giving it attention, it will tend to persist, perpetuate, and grow. So the best thing you can do is just to recognize this is just a byproduct of the mind calming down. It's neither good nor bad in that sense. Just be patient with it arising. As long as we don't feed it, then it will disappear on its own. No matter how long it lasts, it's not really a problem. Even if you have an image arising or lights or physical sensations, if you have the majority of your attention on your meditation object, for example, the breath, anapanasati, then it's still possible to have these somewhat distracting things happening, but you just recognize these are just byproducts. You know, sometimes we can't help but pay attention to them, they draw our attention away, but then we remind ourselves it's not really that important. Right? Sometimes people get fascinated by the unimportant things. Right?
I was wondering whether some people suggested that I may be seeing ghosts or something. Sort of non-human people around the place or something.
Well, you may be. but even if you are, just ignore it. The same advice applies. If you see devas at this point, just ignore them. If you see ghosts at this point, just ignore them. If you have memories, you think, oh, that must be a past life memory. I should really delve into that. I said, no, just ignore it. Just ignore it. Yeah. So much of these things are really unreliable. Right? And images arise, what seems like a memory arise, or a bright light arise, and then we can start to give it meaning. It's almost like we want to see it as a sign of progress or something significant. When actually it's just kind of the mind throwing up things, right? It's not so important. What is important is that recognizing when we start to calm down a little bit, then things start to happen. Little things start to happen, and we start to get to some of these phenomena that we talk about. And that's fine, it's just a stage that we go through. But then, at every stage of Dhamma practice, there's going to be something that is going to try to pull us away and distract us. Right? And you call it Mara, call it a defilements, call it whatever. It's that part of the mind which is trying to distract us from that which is truly important. And will not pull our attention away. And it can even be bright lights. There are things such as nimitta, but you know, if you start getting like bright lights here and there and different colors, it doesn't really matter what the color is or how bright it is or if it's moving, whatever. None of that matters. That will just, it's like back in New Zealand. So any of that, no matter what it is, whether it's exciting or even frightening. I mean, some people get images of a skull coming up or a skeleton or these things as a ghost. The only thing that is dangerous about that, or potentially harmful, is if it gives rise to fear. If we become afraid, then the fear itself can be a problem. Right? But if fear arises, then that is our next object of awareness. That's the next thing that we pay attention to. Whatever our reaction is, and then just notice, okay, well, this reaction is also simply a conditioned phenomena. And we're aware of that, accept that, and let it go. Right? Sometimes our reactions then become something that we become attached to or react to or give attention to. You know? Either we blindly go into our reaction of excitement or fear, or we feel that somehow our reaction is not right. You know, if we react with aversion or we react with attachment, then feel like, well, we're not practicing well. And that just leads on to more problems. But even if we react to our reaction with attachment or guilt or self-identification or self-criticism, all of these things, that's just the next thing to be aware of. All right? You see how quickly these things can reinforce the sense of self, sense of who we think we are. But at every point, we just try to catch ourselves with a reaction. So, okay, well, there's identification, or there is self-congratulation. We think, oh, now meditation's going really well. I'm such a good meditator. And then catch yourself and say, oh, well, that is just a thought. Be aware of that thought. It's not necessarily true or untrue. Just be aware of that thought. Don't buy into it, and let it go. Or self-criticism arises. We have some reaction in meditation. Self-criticism arises. Think, oh, I've been meditating all these years. I still can't do it. Blah, blah, blah. You think, okay, well, that's merely a mental reaction. That's merely mental energy. Be aware of that. Accept that without having aversion towards that reaction. Just accept it fully. It's just another thing that arises from causes and conditions, passes away. And then no matter what happens in meditation, it's not really a problem. No matter what lights or images or moods or reactions we have, as long as you have full awareness, accept it, like fully accept whatever's happening. and then just let it go. As long as we don't become preoccupied by it, as long as we're not feeding it with more attention, it will tend to disappear by itself. Then gradually we get into deeper states of meditation. But if we become preoccupied with visions of ghosts or whatever, then we tend to get stuck at that level. Yeah. So just say, whatever it is, never mind.
When I do body contemplation, the degree of repulsiveness I feel depends on the image or memory. We do it as a memory. The organs, internal organs. If I contemplate on internal organs, I need some little bit more effort to contemplate on my own organs inside the body, but mind tends to slip into the memories I have seen, what I have seen in the pictures or real images. And then the repulsiveness I feel is different from when I imagine in myself my internal organs. So how can we improve that? It's a bit difficult for me to always turn into my body.
Yeah, it requires a lot of persistence because our capacity for denial is so strong. Right? Even if we understand, oh, the human body is composed of all these component parts, and when you open it up, this is what it looks like, and it looks very different when you open it up than it does when it's closed. But having that knowledge does not necessarily lead to wisdom unless we bring it inside, unless we bring it into our own body and confront our own identification. Right? The attachment and identification with this body is a fundamental step, a fundamental level of delusion that needs to be worked with, confronted, challenged regularly. So it takes just a reminder, constant reminder. Even if you're doing a good meditation, the mind is always looking for a way to escape having to confront that which is difficult. Right? That which is difficult is to see that, hey, this body is not really mine, or hey, this body is the only reason it looks like it does is because everything that's inside, everything that we don't normally want to look at, or don't normally pay attention to, or just recognizing how this body is constantly changing, whether we want it to or not. There's so many aspects of this body and mind that are difficult to fully admit. That there will be a part of our minds which will look for any way to get away, any way not to look at that, to distract ourselves. And simply getting drawn into maybe a memory of looking at an anatomy book or something a bit more theoretical rather than personally challenging is another way that mind can distract ourselves. In Thailand, we would sometimes go to see autopsies, and the police hospital was always the most graphic. You go on a Monday to the police hospital, and you got a whole weekend full of stabbings and accidents and fishing people out of the Chao Phraya River, and a whole range of different things, which were quite shocking. And yet the coroners, the people who actually worked there, even though they were seeing this every day, opening up, sawing skulls open, pulling intestines out, I mean, they were doing this all day, they didn't seem like they were developing any wisdom from it whatsoever, right? Because they didn't bring it inside. Right? It was all very external. Right? I mean, around midday they'd be having their lunch, taking a bite of their lunch and then doing the autopsies, pulling. Hopefully not getting them mixed up. But And it was just so obvious that seeing or knowing on that level was not necessarily conducive to wisdom. It was so clear how denial was working. All the truth was laid bare right there in front of them. But did that change their lifestyle? Was that transforming for them? Did it give rise to a sense of dispassion? Were their defilements any less? Didn't seem to be. So, in the same way, when we do that meditation, if we do it very theoretically or clinically, it's not going to have the power to really transform our heart. Now, right, we all have delusion and denial, and it's very thick. And so we have to be patient, just be very patient with ourselves every time that we're actually trying to make a sincere effort to understand things as they truly are. And then we get lost in a thought about ice cream or a pleasant memory or something. Just say, what's going on? Well, it's just that part of the mind which doesn't find it easy to confront the difficult truths. And so that's just part of it. And it takes persistence. And just catching ourselves and recognizing, oh, that's something that doesn't, I'm not really fully ready to delve into that yet, but okay, let's take another look. Be very patient with yourself. I mean, the first time I saw an autopsy, literally, I lost my sight. Right? That was how much some part of my brain did not, my citta did not want to recognize and admit what I was seeing. Right? I went to an autopsy. It was the first year that I was a monk. I was staying in a Thai monastery with Lumpot Biak. I spent my first rains retreat with Lumpot Biak, who's been here. And all of the monks from the monastery were invited to the university, where professor or instructor was performing an autopsy for medical students. And they had some bleachers where we were standing. We were standing kind of looking down. But I was very interested, so I wanted to get close. So I went with another monk, and he and I went first, but then actually all of us went. And once we got right next to the cadaver, then we started to get the smell. Right? And I was really interested to see what was going on, but the smell started to make me feel a little woozy. And after about a half hour, I noticed that my sight was gradually diminishing. It was like blackness was just kind of coming in from the edge. I was still focused on what was going on, but it's like my sight was gradually diminishing down to a little circle and down to a little dot. And then that little dot of sight disappeared, and it was just blackness, and even though my eyes were open. It was bizarre. And at that point I realized I was about to faint. And I told myself, no, this would be too embarrassing. Because I was the only Western monk there. All the other ones are Thai monks. I was the only Western monk. And he said, no, it'd be too embarrassing. I am not going to faint. So I had to use whatever willpower and concentration I had at that time. I had to use that just to hold on to consciousness. My mind held on to consciousness, and my hand held on to the monk's robe next to me, because I couldn't see anything. I was just holding on to him and trying to stay conscious. Just I'm not going to faint. I am not going to faint. And then eventually the autopsy was over, and I just followed the other monk out like a blind person. And we got outside, and I told him, I can't see. So what? I said, I can't see, in Thai. And so then they sat me down and they gave me some of this, they pulled out this tiger balm. See, all the Thai monks, they had a bunch of tiger balm stuck in their noses. So of course, they didn't get any of the smell of the body. Well, they didn't tell me about that. They didn't give me any tiger balm until I nearly fainted. And then afterwards, when I sat down, they gave me some tiger balm, put on my nostrils, and then my sight came back in a few minutes. But that was an example of, even though part of my mind was very interested and sincere and wanted to look and see and understand, another part of my mind did not want to see that, was not ready for that, or it was just too shocking. And then it was like a survival mechanism somehow, that just to close down my sight. I wouldn't have even known that was possible. Any other questions?
Could you explain more about generally about Vipassana and how we apply in daily life? Because we can't sit in all the time, we have to move around, walking around. We can investigate our body all the time.
All right. So the first part of that is Vipassana, and the second part of that is mindfulness in daily life. So just briefly, when we talk about Vipassana, Vipassana literally means insight. And the term Vipassana tends to get used in modern circles, sometimes not in quite the same way that the Buddha used it. Every meditation technique will have elements of samatha, calming, and vipassana, insight, if it's working well. Right? And the same thing is true of meditation in daily life. It will be, if the mind is in balance, there will be a balance of samatha, being settled and calm, settled, peaceful in the moment to a certain degree, and vipassana, well, at least clear seeing, which then will lead to understanding. Most of us do not have the opportunity to intensively meditate. Maybe periodically we're able to do retreats, and even if you're diligent, maybe you get a couple of hours of meditation in a day. So the majority of our time is spent doing other things. And even in the monastery, it's not like we just meditate 16 hours a day. There are periods of retreat where we do meditate very intensely, but there are many other things that we do with our time. As junior monks, we have to learn how to sew our robes and learn chanting and look after the senior monks. I mean, there's a whole range of duties. So even as monastics, the majority of our time is not spent in meditation, even if you spend many hours of the day meditating. So then we have to learn how to incorporate daily life activities into our practice. And we have to learn how to make everything into meditation, which is easy to say. Right? It's like, well, I'll just make everything into meditation. But even when we're sitting with our eyes closed and have a relatively few distractions, even then it's difficult to keep the attention focused. Right? So as soon as we open our eyes, then we have a whole new range of things that we can be distracted by. And when we're moving around, again it increases. When we're in dialogue or conversation with other people, it's even more challenging. So start with the simple things. Right? So when you're sitting meditation, again, paying attention to your body and the physical posture, really feel your body, so that becomes a strong habit, to pay attention to the physical sensations. So with your eyes closed, how do you know that you have a body? Beyond a concept. Is it only a concept? Only a mental perception? Or can you feel your body? Where can you feel your body? Where are you aware of your posture? And then when you open your eyes and go to do walking meditation, pay attention to that transformation. It's not like as soon as the bell goes, then we just jump up and start doing something else. Right? As soon as the bell goes, then that's merely the beginning of a different type of meditation. And we pay attention to the transformation of posture. Maybe we bow to the shrine 3 times, and we slowly get up, and we feel the change in sensations in our legs and the balance of our body. And then we go out and start doing walking meditation. Now, walking meditation is an excellent way to bridge that gap between sitting meditation and daily life activities. And when you're walking back and forth, your eyes are open, but you're not going anywhere. Right? When we do walking meditation, it's just backwards and forwards, and after a few times backwards and forwards, there's nothing new to see. We're not going anywhere, but we're learning how to walk mindfully. Right? And we just try to keep our awareness around our body without getting distracted by what's over there or this person, or if we're just walking and suddenly we find ourselves planning our future, then you can just stop, come back and reestablish your intention. My intention is just to pay attention to the movement of the body, feet coming in contact with the ground or the floor, movement of the legs, the posture, and maybe also the breathing. And then the same principle applies. When a thought arises, a mood arises, whatever our current mental state is, we're aware of that, accept it, and just allow it to cease on its own. Right? If we can start to develop samadhi while we're walking back and forth, then that's a samadhi which is very stable. Right? It's much more easy then to take that samadhi and then translate it into some other simple activity. For example, in the monastery we do sweeping. Here in the monastery, early in the morning, Sangha's out there sweeping. Residents are sweeping the leaves. Now there's not that much difference between walking meditation and sweeping leaves, but it's a little bit more active. You have to pay attention to where the leaves are. You're not just walking back and forth, but you're actually walking around. And you're using your arms. And so it's a little bit more active, but essentially the same principles apply. So while we're sweeping leaves, what's our mind doing? Do we suddenly lose it and we're just daydreaming the whole time? Right? Do we get really distracted? But at each step, it takes a little bit more effort. We may develop a certain peace of mind sitting meditation, but then as soon as we start doing walking meditation with our eyes open, we're just thinking. So it takes a bit more effort to kind of rise up to, okay, now how do I make this activity into meditation? And then from walking meditation, it takes that extra little bit of effort to make sweeping into meditation. The one that I always encourage people to meditate with is brushing your teeth. Hopefully everyone here brushes their teeth. Maybe twice a day even. So when you're brushing your teeth, it's something that, because it's a habit, it only requires maybe 1% mindfulness. Right? It hardly requires any mindfulness at all to successfully brush our teeth. We can be almost completely thinking about what we're going to do later on in the day, or what someone said earlier on in the day. Right? But instead, why not just take that as an opportunity to meditate? Right? You've got 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute. Who knows how long it takes to brush your teeth. But during that time, then say, I don't have the opportunity to meditate many hours of the day in a sitting posture, so why don't I use my time wisely? I don't need to be planning my shopping list at this time. Why don't I just pay attention to the sensations of the brush on the teeth and the movement of the arm. And then when a thought arises, you be aware of that, and then come back to being established in your body, in your physical body. Right? So gradually, throughout the day, we look for opportunities where we can truly take a very simple activity and make it into meditation. Now it's easier when we're not engaging with other people. We're just doing simple manual things. But then from that, we can extend it into more complicated activities. While you're at your computer, it's so easy to get drawn into the screen and just absorbed into the information or the graphics or images, whatever is on the screen. It's so easy then to lose touch with body awareness while you're at the computer. So that takes an extra bit of effort, right? If computers are going to be a necessary reality of modern life, then we need to learn how to make that into meditation as well, even though there's no specific instructions in the suttas on how to use computers. The basics still apply. And when you're sitting, even though if you're paying attention to emails or whatever it is that you're reading, then also pay attention to your body. How are we sitting when we're at the computer? If we really lose touch with our bodies, we tend to become a bit contorted. Right? So maintain awareness of your body, so you're still sitting aware, straight. Yeah? And periodically just stop and take 3 deep breaths. You just stop, close your eyes, take a deep breath, relax. Do that 3 times. And that just brings us back into our bodies, into the present moment. It doesn't take very long. And then we can start again. And if there's any stress or tension that is built up, then we become more clearly aware of that. Right? Sometimes we're working and we stop, take a few deep breaths and realize, wow, I wasn't even aware, but shoulders are really tight, or my belly's very tight, or feeling stress in my back. And just 3 breaths helps us to be aware of that, relax again, and start over, before these knots of tension really build up. Now, one of the advanced daily life practices is then conversation with others. There's a lot going on when we speak with other human beings. Even a simple conversation, there is the listening, there's the actual words that are being said, and our interpretation of those words, and then the nonverbal communication. And then while that's happening, there may be an emotional reaction on our part. There may be verbalization, preparing what we're going to say. The other person's still talking. We're already preparing what we're going to say. Right? So there can be a lot going on all at the same time. So trying to pay attention to all of this, right? Step by step, kind of untangling it. And then even dialogue with other people, becomes a very fruitful form of meditation. So there's no excuse not to meditate, because as long as we're awake and alive, then we have the opportunity for developing sati, mindfulness, developing wisdom, application of wisdom, developing right effort, encouraging wholesome states of mind and recognizing and discouraging unwholesome states of mind. So every activity and throughout the day, then there's the opportunity for practicing.
I'll tell you this one. One day my son is sitting in front of a computer, laptop, and I call him, Kiwi, many times, and he quiet instantly. At last he said, I'm mindfulness in front of computer. He said he is mindfulness. Is that right?
He may have some miccha samadhi, or wrong samadhi. There may be some focused awareness, So the difference between right samadhi, sama samadhi, and miccha samadhi, or wrong samadhi, is how much mindfulness there is. Right? There are certain forms of samadhi which, it's true, we're absorbed into something, but there's not a self-awareness there. There's not an ability to translate that into wisdom. Even if you're sitting with your eyes closed and it's peaceful and time is going quickly, but there's very little awareness, that is not a helpful form of samadhi. So the same thing is true with other activities. Get absorbed into a computer game. I imagine it takes a certain amount of concentration. You just get absorbed into it. But that's not the type of concentration or mindfulness that's going to lead to wisdom. I mean, people can be mindful of everything. People can be mindful of very unwholesome things. If you're robbing a bank, you have to have a certain amount of samadhi and body awareness and mindfulness, otherwise you're going to make a mess of it. But that's not the type of samadhi and mindfulness and body awareness that's going to lead to developing satipatthana and wisdom.
People blame on mindfulness, anti-mindfulness, but they are ignorant. They forgot something, and they say, "Oh, I'm gonna mindfulness." They not tell to them.
And playing instrument, musician have very strong mindfulness. So that's with just samadhi, like sati, you have to concentrate on.
Well, even with artistic endeavors, it depends. It can be sama samadhi or it can be miccha samadhi. Right? Whether it's playing music or sports, there are certain mental states that you can get into, and they call it the zone, where everything flows kind of very effortlessly, feel right in balance, and not distracted by a lot of self-awareness. And that's very effective for doing something very well. And that is a form of samadhi, but it's not necessarily developing wholesome states of mind. Right? It can be a real mix. Right? It depends on the individual and what mental states are being developed at that particular time.
But if they get into meditation, they can carry it on easily.
We have a lot of musicians, ex-musicians, in our monastic sangha. Yeah.
You are one.
Yeah, myself included. I learned yesterday that Ajahn Dhamma used to play piano. So we're not going to get a band together, though.
Okay, I find that driving, I can zone out, and I'm amazed I go from A to B and think, how did I get here?
All right.
It's like autonomously. I've driven so long in my life, all over the world.
Who needs autonomous cars? We have autonomous people.
I just wonder, is this a good state or a bad state?
Well, it can be improved upon. Yeah. It is amazing, though, isn't it? You can drive a large, heavy metal machine at high speeds, surrounded by other similar vehicles at high speeds. You'd think it would be very dangerous, and yet you only need a very small bit of mindfulness to do that successfully, just due to force of habit. Right? So that's good to recognize, but not really the optimal state to drive in or to live in. Right? It's much more fruitful if we can find ways to really be present. Right? Partly it depends on what our minds are doing during that time. If we're just daydreaming, thinking about things, mulling things over, or just thoughts are arriving randomly, not necessarily things that are very important, then Again, the same principle applies with any activity in daily life. Right? You just take driving as your meditation object in the same way that when you come into a meditation hall and you sit down, it takes a certain amount of, okay, there's an intention. What am I going to do during this period of time? My body will be still, but my mind has to have a certain direction. Right? Instead of just sitting down and seeing what happens, say, well, am I going to direct my intention towards paying attention to the breath, or sensations in the body, or developing loving kindness, or what is it exactly we intend to do? So when you get in your car, you can do the same thing and really try to pay attention to maintaining awareness of your body, awareness of the surroundings. Right?
I'm not daydreaming or anything. It's like I get in and it just, my body does it automatically. I just go clear in the mind. It's just, I'm not actually being distracted. I just hop in and something takes over autonomously and I can just be blank in the mind, just think of nothing, just...
Well, it can be a form of samadhi then, but like I was saying, any form of samadhi that doesn't have clear awareness, it's not so useful. It still may be beneficial. Like if you sit meditation and time goes very quickly, you feel very relaxed, but maybe there's not much clear awareness. It's as if it could be a bit foggy, or maybe a sense of kind of dark, but you're definitely not falling asleep. The body's awake, and it's very refreshing. And yet, without that clear awareness of what's happening moment by moment, it's more difficult to translate into wisdom. It's still very calming. It's still useful, right? So maybe that's the same thing when you're driving your car, because it's something that is so habitual that you can just get into kind of a calm, almost samadhi state while it's happening. And in a sense, it's practical because it's peaceful and you're less inclined to get irritated. Time goes quickly. But if you can add some awareness, as much awareness of body and surroundings and just state of mind during that time, then that will be even better, right? Say, even if your mind is not thinking, just be clearly aware and watching your mind that's not thinking, right? And just knowing, just watching, okay, there is this calm state of mind. A calm state of mind. Just watching and watching and watching and being clearly aware of that. Even just that much, right? It kind of shifts that samadhi into a type of samadhi that is then very easily transferred into developing wisdom.
Now that I'm not switching off because I can recall what I've seen, it's not like I'm driving, oh, there's a red sign, there's a blue sign, and now you just go from A to B and then suddenly you think, oh, this and this and this on reflection. So I know that I'm aware of my surroundings, but I'm not actually focusing and concentrating on each individual distractive.
Well, whatever's going on, just have another part of the mind which is observing somewhat objectively. It's like that which is watching. And then things will come into balance. So you'll notice, if there are periods of time where you're not very aware, that would become more obvious. Or if you are driving in a very calm, aware state, you actually are driving in a calm, aware state most of the time, then you'll be aware of that. And so that's helpful either way.
You were talking about developing wisdom and going towards wisdom. I understood wisdom to be to arise when you sort of understand anicca, dukkha, anatta, or dukkha, yes, mainly. That kind of thing, not in an intellectual way, but in a more deep sort of way. and that it's very close to being the wisdom in an Arahant or Buddha. Am I right in thinking like that?
Well, developing wisdom essentially means seeing things as they truly are. And because we have a very thick layer of delusion in our lives around so many things, that it takes work, actually, to see things as they truly are, rather than just to understand things through a maze and a web of projections and perceptions. Now, seeing things as unsatisfactory, constantly changing, and non-self, that is one aspect of seeing things as they truly are. For sure. But even wisdom can be developed in more ordinary things. Right? Sometimes it's just very ordinary. Things that we maybe have been there regularly, but we haven't noticed before. Right? Maybe it's a trait in ourselves. Maybe it's something as ordinary as something in our yard, or a tree, or an animal that's regularly been there, but we just haven't noticed it before. But suddenly our mindfulness is becoming a bit more keen, and we're aware of more things. Right? That's particularly useful then when you're dealing with other people, for example. You start to become more sensitive and aware with other people. Right? And that helps us to react in appropriate ways and say things at the right time. Right? This is all just gradual developing of wisdom as well. Right? Now, of course, that can be developed and taken deeper and deeper and deeper. And certainly when we're confronting the identification with our body and our moods and feelings and sensations and thought perceptions, all of these, right? Now that leads to a gradual development of wisdom on a much more profound level. But even that is not necessarily yet the level of an arhat. Right? Even sotapanna, stream entry, is still a very advanced achievement. Sotapanna has already achieved the perfection of right view.
What will you do when you do meditation and then you fall to sleep? How you look at the technique to refrain that?
Yeah, there are many things you can do.
To sleep.
When you fall asleep while you're meditating, when I first used to go home to visit my mother every morning, we'd sit in meditation together, but she'd always just fall asleep. So in that case I said, never mind, Mom, let's just spend time together. But when you're developing meditation and you start to go into periods of sleepiness, you have to be very careful not to allow that to become a habit. It's one of those hindrances which is very deceptive because it's a bit pleasant. Right? Sitting meditation, you feel, oh, I feel so relaxed. I feel so peaceful. You kind of, look around the meditation hall and be like, and then the bell goes and they think, oh, I had a really good meditation. Well, very peaceful, feel really refreshed. Yeah, it's because you were sleeping. And sometimes it's very difficult to even know one's sleeping, even know that one's nodding. Right? I mean, I've had friends, they'd be nodding like this, and I would kind of, we'd have an agreement that if someone's nodding too much, you just tap them on the knee. I'd tap them on the knee. He says, I wasn't nodding. Because there's very little self-awareness. So that's why it's a particularly deceptive hindrance. Because if you're angry, or if you're full of desire, you're usually pretty clearly awake when that's happening. But if you're sleepy, it can just be a pleasant habit that we get into and then can really get stuck. And then when it becomes a habit, as soon as you sit down, within 5 minutes, you just go right into that groove. So then you need to find some way to stop it. Right? And there are lots of ways you can do that. Now one is, as you sit down to meditate, you're clearly watching body and mind are beginning to calm down and relax. Of course, we start with a certain amount of distraction, then it maybe comes into balance, we become more aware, and then we reach a stage where it becomes a bit fuzzy. We're still aware, but it's a bit fuzzy, and then we lose our awareness, and then we can fall into sleepiness. So when it just starts to get a bit fuzzy, not very clear, then you have to do something. You say, stop, I'm not going to allow it to go further than this. Maybe that means opening your eyes. Right? Try that first. You just try to, as soon as it starts to get not clear, just, okay, stop, open your eyes, take a deep breath, and start again. Right? Right? Sometimes just keeping your eyes open a little bit, lets in a bit of light, that can help. Right? Sometimes raising your hands up helps. Right? If you're not very aware of falling into the habit of sleepiness, then just raising your hands up will create a little bit more energy. Just that much. It takes effort. And it brings more energy into the body. And it's also an early warning system. You feel like you're completely aware and you realize, oh, your hands have fallen down. And that's the first sign that you're falling asleep. And so it's like an early warning system. So, oh, I didn't even realize my hands fell down. But then you can feel that and you raise them back up again. Or if you are a hard case, sometimes even though the hands fall down, I'm not aware of that, and then you still fall asleep. Then you can put something on top of your head, right? And this was a normal thing that we would do in the monasteries, right? We'd find something and put it on top of your head, and just balance it there. Matchboxes, a little box of matches is very good. Just balance it there, because then, even before we're aware of becoming drowsy, our head will start to tilt forward and then the box of matches will fall off. Right? Now that's fine if you're meditating alone in your kuti, but then if you're meditating with other people, it's a bit annoying. Yeah, it's a bit annoying if you're meditating, it's quiet, and then you hear clunk, clunk, and then the same person, clunk, clunk, all repeatedly. So then you have to find something soft and silent to put on top of your head so it doesn't disturb other people. I went through a phase of falling asleep a lot, my second year as a monk. And I put a matchbox with some rocks in it, but then tied a string around the matchbox and then tied that string to my ear. So when it fell off, it didn't make any sound. It just pulled on my ear. It fell off, went ding, pulled on my ear. And that would wake me up. It would keep the other people laughing as well, keep them awake. But that was very effective. Use your creativity. So that's something that you can do. Also, there are different forms of meditation where you can try to visualize a bright light. But often that this hindrance needs something a bit more active to counteract it. But just don't allow it to become a habit. Even though it's comfortable, it's pleasant, you don't want to get into the habit, because it's almost impossible then if you're stuck in that, to develop wisdom. Now, walking meditation is one of the very helpful antidotes to sleepiness. Almost every benefit that you can develop while sitting meditation, you can also develop by doing walking meditation. And it's not impossible to fall asleep while you're walking, but it is much more difficult. And even if you're very sleepy, early in the morning, late at night, just doing walking meditation, it brings up energy, right? And many times where I'd be meditating all day and it'd get to be about 9 o'clock at night and I was about to fall over with sleepiness. And I would just say, no, come on, just get out there on your walking meditation path. And then I'd get out there and a few times back and forth and I was wide awake. I realized, well, this is not physical tiredness. This is really just a mental state of mind. A state of mind that as soon as I changed my posture, started moving back and forth, suddenly I'm wide awake and I could happily do walking meditation for another hour and a half before I felt sleepy again. Right? So anytime you start to feel drowsy, even if you just meditate for 5 minutes and you say, okay, now I'm going to do walking meditation. That's fine. It's better to do 5 minutes of high quality, clear meditation and then stop. And then maybe do something else and then do another 5 minutes of high quality, clear meditation. Rather than doing 45 minutes of 5 minutes of clear meditation and 40 minutes of sleeping. Right? Yeah. So it's okay to do short periods of time, but you have to find some way that you're only developing wholesome qualities when you sit down or when you're meditating. You don't want to be spending all that time developing delusion.
Does it come under greed as well, another sensual desire and ill will, greed and hatred? And the sleepiness is still considered as a greed?
What, the
Craving?
Sleepiness?
Yeah.
It's generally more associated with delusion. Yeah.
The first two, it's always greed and hatred.
Yeah, attraction and aversion. And then sleepiness is more to do with delusion and lack of clarity and confusion.
And when we sit, how can we know this is the right meditation or wrong meditation? Because we just in the peaceful sitting, but how can we know that we go to the right way or we go to the wrong way?
First thing to be aware of is that's a doubt. Just this mind state of, am I practicing the right way? Am I doing the right thing? Well, that's doubt. That's also a hindrance. If you're following the instructions of reputable teachers or the instructions that you find in the suttas, you can be pretty sure that those are good instructions and you just try to follow them to the best of your ability. So that helps to cut through any wondering about, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? But also look at the results. What are the results? Is it leading to an increased clarity? Generally, over a period of time, are our defilements becoming less? The wholesome states of mind, are they gradually becoming stronger over a period of time? Like you can take a new type of meditation and experiment with it for a week or a month. And then you'll notice different results. You'll just notice, start to see things differently. It will affect how we perceive things. It may affect our moods. May affect the type of defilements that arise or how strong they are. And just keep paying attention to the results. And then we'll get a sense if this is beneficial or not. Essentially, if it's leading to an increase in wholesome states of mind, then it's beneficial. If we gradually see that unwholesome states of mind are decreasing, then we know it's beneficial. Sometimes you have to rely on your intuition as well. What type of meditation to practice at what time and how much. It's not always clear when we're making progress and when we're going backwards. Right? Sometimes it feels like we're going backwards, but actually we are making progress. Right? Practicing intense meditation, you feel, I used to be more peaceful before I meditated. But that's a sign that maybe things are bubbling up from the proverbial subconscious, or opening the closet door. Open the closet door of our mind and pull everything out to clean it. It looks messier before it's going to look cleaner. But we're still along the right path. You're still doing the right thing. So it takes a certain amount of watching, observing, objectively, trusting. Sometimes we're practicing and we don't seem to be making any progress. But also that's just a natural way that we learn things. It's not like we put this much effort in and immediately see this much results. A nice graph of effort and time, and then there's a nice clear progress. It's much more like a zigzag, right? Or sometimes there's just plateaus where we're putting forth a lot of consistent effort in the right way, and yet we just feel like we're stuck on a plateau and we're not learning anything new anymore, and it just seems like we're stuck and start to doubt if we're practicing correctly. And if we stick with it, suddenly there'd be like, boom, a sudden upswing in a feeling of progress, or how do we even define progress? But a sense of seeing things clearly, or insights arising, a deepening of samadhi. Right? So it's not always clear. Right? Sometimes you always have to have persistence. And sometimes we need to make adjustments in our practice, right? We don't want to just keep banging our heads against the wall with some form of meditation or Dhamma practice that's just not working, right? Don't just kind of blindly keep following something if it's not working. But at some stage, you think, well, maybe if I practice like this, or make this adjustment, or look at things from this direction. Right? Certain defilements, they seem like they're just never decreasing at all, until maybe we start to investigate or contemplate from a different angle, look at things from in a different way. And then suddenly that kind of opens up a whole new way of looking at things. And, right? Now, the Dhamma has many different ways that we can practice. It's not like there's only one meditation technique. There's a whole range of different ways to contemplate and look at life. So if one thing's not working at any particular time, then you can always, if samadhi doesn't seem to be working, you can still persist with that, but then maybe also add some contemplations. Right? Read the suttas. You read the suttas, and it's full of wonderful teachings that will help start to stimulate looking at life in a different way, looking at our body, our feelings, perceptions, thought formations, consciousness, looking at everything from a different angle.
But the key thing is to be aware.
Awareness is always essential. For every aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path, mindfulness has to be there.
In practical, to be aware is mean we have to focus on one thing, like focus on some parts of the body. Like when we do walking meditation, so we focus on our leg, on right leg. Is it true?
Awareness is always beneficial, but the scope of our awareness will change according to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Now, if you're just sitting with your eyes closed and there's no one else around, the only thing you really have to be aware of is sensations of the air coming in or going out, or maybe even only the sensations around your nostrils. And that's enough. that you're being very mindful, but the scope of mindfulness is very narrow. And that is taking responsibility when we're sitting meditation. But suddenly you open your eyes, you become active, you have your family around, or you're at work, or you're driving, or whatever, and you realize, if I'm going to be aware, what does that mean now? If you're in a busy situation at work and you're just being mindful of your nose tip, and then something happens and things are being done and you're not reacting at the right time, people will get frustrated. They say, you weren't paying attention. You say, yes, I was paying attention to my nose tip. I was very mindful. Right? But we weren't mindful in the appropriate way. Right? So when we get into more group-oriented situations, or family-oriented situations, or more active scenarios, then it's important that our scope of mindfulness broadens out to take in other people, to take in our surroundings. Right? And that's also the continuity of mindfulness. Right? But it's also developing wisdom, because we have to then keep looking, what is the appropriate thing to pay attention to? Right? So it's not just being aware only. It's mindfulness together with wisdom, and having the wisdom to know what to pay attention to. So in group situations, we want to have an all-around mindfulness, and that helps us to fit in just the right way, right? And say the right thing at the right time, and respond at the right way, right way. Right? And then when we go home or we're alone again, if we're just alone doing manual labor, then our scope of mindfulness can, again, narrow down a bit, just to the sensations in this body and the thoughts in this mind. And it's not so essential that we have to pay attention to what's going on beyond that. Like we're doing walking meditation, or just brushing your teeth. But then being flexible, so that as soon as someone else comes into the room, we incorporate them into our scope of mindfulness, in daily life experience. If you're in the meditation hall, you don't have to do that. Someone else comes into the room, you don't have to pay attention to them. That's one of the luxuries of being in a meditation hall. But in daily life, we also have a responsibility to pay attention to our surroundings and other people, and that is part of what it means to be mindful and responsible. Very similar. Yeah, mindfulness and clear comprehension will be necessary. A necessary foundation has to be there in order to see things clearly, in order to have that. Because even if we're curious about understanding things, if we haven't developed clear awareness, then it's difficult to see past the surface. We just get stuck on the surface. So yeah, it's like we develop these tools while we're meditating, sati and mindfulness, clear comprehension, and the ability to hold our awareness on something. So it's not just like we're aware of this and aware of this, and then a thought, and then a physical sensation, and then a sound and a sight. Right? That is a continuity of awareness, but it's lacking samadhi. So when the mind is in balance, there is awareness, but you're also able to hold your awareness on something so that your understanding goes in and penetrates and understands it thoroughly. That's the mind that's in balance.
Sometimes when unwholesome states arise in mind, whenever it is detected by awareness, I can let go and it disappears completely. But some unwholesome states, or wholesome states, whatever, it tends to linger. Even though I detect it with mindfulness, it doesn't work. It seems like some sort of force inside, which tense it during the some time. But when we just observe it without getting involved with it, I can see then there is a guilt coming, then again I involve in why I feel guilty, why I want this to go away, sort of these similar thoughts coming. One thing I do sometimes is, if it is an angry thought, I tend to feel metta or some counteracting thoughts I can build up in my mind and stop it or investigate it. But I feel guilty when these thoughts are coming. What is your recommendation in these things?
So, gradually through practice we develop a range of skillful means. When we have defilements coming up, defiled thoughts, then we have to have a range from the subtle to more strong. So if a little bit of irritation arises in our mind, if we're just aware of that, often it just disappears. We say, oh, okay, that's just awareness. Or, sorry, that's just aversion, that's just frustration, that's a little irritation. Never mind. And then it disappears. You know? Often it only takes that little bit of wisdom to say, oh, never mind. It's not that big a deal. And then boom. But if our mindfulness still is not fully developed, and then when stronger emotions come up, we're aware of it, but they don't go away. And we say, oh, never mind. But they don't go away. They persist, and they can go on and on and on. So then we have to find some other way of dealing with that. Right? And it may be, for example, you say to yourself, okay, well, this is not going away easily. What am I attached to? If it's not going away, then I must be holding on to something. What is it exactly? Right? And it may not be clear initially, you know. Whatever we're thinking about may not be the obvious object of attachment. So then you have to really delve into and say, well, why does this make me angry? Because that person did that or that person said that. Okay, well, no one can force us to be angry, but why does that stimulate our anger? It's because, you can trace it back, and because I wanted the situation to be different. Well, why is that a problem? Because I wanted people to agree with my opinion. Well, why is that a problem? Well, because maybe I feel insecure. If someone else has a different opinion than I do, it makes me feel insecure, and then I get angry. Right? Or trace it back. And so, well, what's the root of insecurity? So a certain identification. We identify with certain mental things. We identify with certain perceptions or opinions, and then, right? Keep tracing it back, and try to get it down to the roots of what is it that we're actually holding on to. And if we can do that, we actually see the actual place that we're holding on. Often it's easier than to let go. You say, oh, that's what it is, right? I wanted recognition and I didn't get it. Or I wanted respect and I didn't get it. Or I just wanted comfort and I didn't get it, right? And then you realize, well, that's not such a big deal. Okay, that's all it is. And then it's easy to let go of. And then the results disappear and go back to being peaceful. That's just one example of using investigation as an antidote. But you can develop a whole range of different antidotes for defilements coming in. Like for anger, for example, sometimes it could be developing loving kindness. But when you're already angry, it may be too late to develop loving kindness because it doesn't work. Right? But you can pay attention to, you feel the sensations of the anger in your body, and it's actually unpleasant. There's a certain part of anger that is pleasant because we're reinforcing our sense of I am right, self-righteousness, I am right. But that also should be questioned, recognized. But there's a lot that's unpleasant about anger, and even about desire. I mean, a mind can be perfectly peaceful and content, and then a desire arises, and we're no longer peaceful and content. It actually destroys our being perfectly content, because we think, oh, now I have to have this thing in order to be happy. But actually, wait a minute, a couple of seconds ago I was perfectly happy already. So just recognizing the drawbacks, how unpleasant it is to have hindrances in the mind, that itself will work. That's very effective, because we want to be happy. Why do we do what we want to do? We want to be happy. Our minds want to incline towards being peaceful and happy. It's just the delusion keeps tricking us. And so we have to find some way to see things as they truly are. And sometimes it just takes a lot of persistence. When emotions are very strong, sometimes it just says, no, I'm not going to react in an unwholesome way, or no, I'm not going to say anything. You want to say something, I'm not going to say anything. Right? Sometimes when things are very strong, then subtle reactions are not going to work. You have to just use something that's a bit more strong and energetic.
Normally I do love and kindness meditation, but sometimes I unaware the thought coming, and I just thinking, oh, I want to do this, but many times I can see it's not my thought, only the form, feeling, perception, mental formation. But sometimes I unaware cannot sleep, and the thought become restless.
Mm-hmm.
How can I be aware again?
As soon as you catch yourself being lost in a thought, at any point you just say stop, reestablish mindfulness, and start all over again. That's fine. Sometimes we're very mindful, and as soon as a thought arises, boom, we see it. We realize that's just a conditioned reaction. Other times, our mindfulness just isn't up to speed yet. There's a bit of a gap. And then we just get caught in a thought. It takes our attention away, and we get absorbed in it. Fine, we're not perfect yet. So you just have to be patient with yourself. And as soon as you recognize what happened, then you say, okay, that's fine. Don't criticize yourself. Just say, oh, okay. Got lost in thought again. No problem. Start over. Takes a lot of repetition, a lot of patience. But then gradually good habits form. Okay. We should probably wind things down. Every day I'm giving Dhamma teachings, just at that other monastery just across the Tasman Sea. Right? So you're all welcome to pop over there anytime you're free. And we have places for both men and women to stay in the monastery and practice. And it's a very beautiful, expansive monastery. We have huts available for people to stay. And you're all invited. So anytime you're free, or it's a good excuse to go to New Zealand anyways. Yes. And then you're very welcome to come visit us at Vimutti Monastery.
But any time or in the rain street, in the rain season?
You write us ahead of time, and I'll let you know. Even the rains retreat is still possible to come and stay, but then we like to have people who are more experienced if people are experienced and are able to look after themselves, we're happy to give them a kuti and encouragement to practice, and they have everything they need. During the summer, we get a lot of newer people coming through. Right? People maybe have never meditated before or are just curious, and they still come and stay in the monastery. So there's a lot more instruction, more group meditation. But during the winter periods, then it's more, we have people who are more experienced, and fewer group activities, generally no group meditations, so people have to be responsible to look after themselves.
We got the house for lay people.
We have kutis for lay people, yeah. Small dwellings, and we have sala where people can practice meditation.
We get your website.
Have a look at our website. Lots of photos there that you can look at.
We hope one day we visit Brisbane. I've never been there.
Well,
But you know
yeah.
my son's name is Kiwi.
It must be meant to be then. You have a good excuse then to go. Yeah. All right, very good. It's been a real pleasure to be here, and I hope to be able to visit again before too long.